Welcome back to another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. This week we'll talk about NXT Takeover in your house, as well as a near tie in the Wednesday Night Wars. We'll also highlight a new champion on SmackDown, some big takeaways from Raw, as well as looking ahead at the most upcoming WWE pay-per-view this weekend. That's all to come on this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Hey there, back again. I am your host, Sean Meyers, and back in the co-pilot chair is one Justin Lowery. A late Friday night for Mr. Lowery. Justin, how are you doing?
Doing great. All of a sudden, I feel in the mood to have a Miller Lite. I'm not sure why.
Do you have one with you? Because I clearly am wearing a shirt.
As I am staring at the old Miller Lite.
You can drink if you want. It's up to you.
Yeah. Wow. If I want, maybe a little Corona in honor of the pandemic.
Listen, the Sandman would be drinking right now.
So would Austin.
Yes, he would be drinking maybe 1/10 of it and just missing his mouth with most of it.
This is true.
Okay. Anyway, we'll leave the '90s wrestling and beer drinking in the past and focus on what I think has been an interesting week. There's a lot of newsworthy things that happened, and I know we're sort of doing like every other week with you, so I also want to get your thoughts on some things that have happened over the last couple weeks. But to me, I mentioned before we came on that I had an interesting topic/scenario, and I think so much of the talk for 3 months basically was about COVID-19 and how it's affected the world, how it's affected sports, and we've brought it down to how it's affected professional wrestling. Obviously, it still continues to do so, and there might be the chance that that kind of goes away in terms of its effect on wrestling fairly soon. But I think we saw a couple weeks ago that the, racial inequality topic has become even more prominent in America. And if you're a celebrity, if you're an athlete, if you're a sports organization, it seems like almost everyone has come out and said something. Some people have been criticized for what they've said, like Drew Brees. Most people have supported this cause of Black Lives Matter, things like that. And we've seen a lot of that from WWE superstars. Not surprised there, although I think you really know if you go to the top that WWE doesn't have a great track record in terms of equality, whether it be in terms of minorities or women or whatever. But they have made progress, whether that's for public relations reasons or not. We've seen the women get a really nice push. We saw the main event, WrestleMania. They had their own pay-per-view, Evolution. And Evolution was talked about, I think, on WWE Backstage recently. It seems as though that's probably going to happen again. They'll do a sequel to Evolution. Here's my idea. And I don't know that anyone's really brought this up. What do you think the reaction would be? What would your reaction be if WWE kind of went with I don't know how to properly phrase it, like a minorities-only pay-per-view, where they have obviously the African-American performers, but they could have other, Asians descent, someone like Mustafa Ali or Arya Daivari. Do you think that's something that, one, would help WWE's public image that has been pretty terrible, and two, would actually appeal to a lot of the fans, especially during this time?
I think a lot of people would kind of see right through it as a PR stunt.
But I agree, but I don't think Roger Goodell really believes what he's saying, but he's saying it because that's what the NFL needs to be saying.
Right. Because, we've seen him with the Kaepernick situation years ago, how that was handled. So we know where they stand. Vince and company, they're going to throw it out there like they care. They do that, with the LGBT, the gay community, breast cancer awareness. But in reality, I think Vince he does not really care for minorities all that much. You don't see too many minorities in the main event. And if you do, it's usually for short spurts, not long. The Rock is probably the one that comes to mind as the guy that really broke through.
Right. And he was interesting, of course, because his father was black, his mother was
Samoan
or Polynesian. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was almost forced into the women's revolution. They ran that pay-per-view and they haven't did it again.
And it seemed like it was well received, even though we talked about how terribly promoted it was.
Right, and I thought it was a good pay-per-view. The women's, they have a Royal Rumble match now. They have a tag team, titles now, which are mismanaged. The women have cooled off, in my opinion.
But we'll get to NXT. They just also main evented the NXT pay-per-view.
Right. Vince, and let's be honest, we know where Vince lies in the political aspect. This isn't a political show, and I mean, you could have political allegiance to whoever you want. It's America, free country. But we know that Linda McMahon works for Donald Trump, the president of the United States. She even recently tweeted positive things backing him, I saw on Twitter. And it's slipping my mind. Who was
Jackson
the
Riker?
Yeah, who
of the Forgotten Sons
posting pro-Trump tweets.
And I'll say this. I don't really care about that, but Kevin Owens called him out on kind of including like his character and catchphrase in it as like a cheap way to kind of get that over. And like that's...
Yeah, I mean, if the guy's a Trump supporter, that's his right. I mean, people support presidents all the time, and people hate presidents all the time. But and I saw a lot of wrestlers went after him for his pro-Trump tweets. Well, okay. I mean, first off, I hate how if you have an opinion, if you're pro or against or whoever, the other side has to attack. But okay, they did. Well, I think you need to look past that and look who you work for. Okay, don't attack like a coworker when you're working for people who are pro-Trump and they're in his allegiance, I guess you could say. And they go to Saudi Arabia, which is a god-awful country that murders people. So don't get on your high horse with a coworker and then fall in line. I just find that hypocritical.
Right, but I think you and I both realize, like, if they say something about Vince, really, they will probably lose their job or suffer in their job. If they say it about Jackson Riker, there probably won't be.
You're 100% correct that you're right. They would suffer. But political opinions, everybody has one. There's no right or wrong, I guess. I mean, if you have
back to this point, though, would you consider would that be a divisive or a political type thing if they say, hey, we are going to have a show? And I think you basically kind of have it, okay, we have the women's only, let's make it a minority only. And you can include the women if you want. Like, obviously, they have black and a lot of Asian competitors who are terrific. Obviously, we see Io Shirai and Asuka are two of probably the top 3 to 5 in the entire company.
Yeah.
You also look at Tamina, Nia Jax, who I don't really want to see her.
Tamina and Nia Jax aren't good examples of great wrestlers. But I see where you're going.
But if you want to just limit it to the men even of color, I think it could be terrific. We have Bobby Lashley going to be in one of the biggest matches at Backlash. Apollo Crews is a champion. The New Day, they have been very adamant about their beliefs. They're not hiding their support to all the people, all the victims of this as well. I mentioned Mustafa Ali, Cedric Alexander, Ricochet. There is a pretty ridiculous amount of talent that it could still be a good show. And I think that this would be something that I really do think people would embrace. They wouldn't embrace Vince McMahon. I think they would embrace the performers.
Oh, I agree. I mean, me personally, I enjoy a lot of the Japanese and Mexican style of wrestling. So, I mean, I'm down with that. Some of the guys you name, Ali, we haven't seen him in months. I mean, very talented wrestler. Cedric Alexander, very talented wrestler. Apollo Crews, like you name them, they're not Vince's, people. Ricochet, forget it. Especially we'll get to probably Paul Heyman being out of Raw, but forget his push. I mean, these guys are amazing talents, amazing wrestlers, and I would pay to watch these guys on a pay-per-view, even if I didn't have the network. I mean, these are tremendous talents that just don't get their due. The only, I guess, minority race that Vince really loves are Samoans. I mean, honestly, let's be real. Let's be realistic with it.
And
I
we
don't
see
know.
that with Nia Jax getting this ridiculous push because she's related to The Rock.
Right. Family heritage. I mean, there's some great, Samoan wrestlers throughout the course of
And the
history.
Usos, I
Absolutely.
didn't mention the Usos because one of them's hurt right now, but I mean, they're terrific as well. And you
Right.
mentioned the Mexican or Hispanic. We already see Andrade and we see
Oh,
Zelina Vega and Angel Garza, but in NXT, we just saw on Wednesday, they have a new sort of like a Hispanic group with the former DJZ. He's called Joaquin Wild, along with Raul Mendoza. And then I don't even remember the guy's name because he took the mask off. He was Phantasma, and he's the Cruiserweight champion. So they have, I would guess, probably at least 30 plus minority competitors. And to me, this would be like if the NFL and other entities that haven't really been that great in terms of adopting this like equality, they're now trying to make changes. I think this would go a long way for saying people would say, okay, WWE is at least trying to do something different. Maybe that they're doing it to kind of save face, but I think more than not, people would give them credit and embrace something like that. I think that would be a very refreshing move for Vince McMahon and company to do, even if Vince's political views align differently. I think he would realize what that would mean for the company's perception.
he might, but
I
I
don't
mean,
think it'll happen. I'm just saying it
oh no,
should. It
it would
absolutely
never happen.
should.
I mean, and actually, if we talk about AEW, to me is far ahead of them in that race. I mean, their
That's
ex
a low
women's
bar to clear. I will say that.
yeah, their ex women's champion is a trans wrestler. So I mean, they have wrestlers of different sexualities, and they're open with it.
Right.
Where that's pretty much taboo. I mean, Vince will run a lesbian angle. I mean, he had Billy and Chuck, but it was more in the ha ha ha, this is funny, not in a serious type of
Right,
way.
and they haven't really talked about Sonya Deville being a lesbian on WWE TV, now on Total Divas and stuff like that. It's very well known. And I
Right,
just
right.
found this
And
out. I did not realize this. If you watch the interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament, Drake Maverick's loss came against Jake Atlas, who's a newcomer. He is openly gay. And I guess there's a newspaper article that just came out about that. Again, will they say that on NXT? Probably not. And I don't have a problem with that. Like maybe the superstar doesn't want that to be part of their storyline, but I know with Sonya Deville, she really did want a storyline with Mandy Rose,
right.
and it didn't happen. So
Yeah.
I agree, but I will give WWE credit right now. Look at their champions or their top challengers. Again, we said Bobby Lashley is challenging Drew McIntyre for the title. Apollo Crews is I always get this confused. He's the U.S. champion.
Yes.
And Asuka is the Raw Women's Champion. Io Shirai is the NXT Women's Champion. Keith Lee is the North American Champion.
Yes.
I believe Street Profits are the Tag Team Champions. So this is like more than half of the company's champions or top contenders right now
Yeah.
are minority. That's progress, even if that wasn't the intention of Vince McMahon all along.
Right. And I mean, maybe this will help us segue. I don't know what your plan for the next topic was, but let me segue and maybe throw you off your game into Raw and changes that just recently came down with Paul Heyman. You're talking about the Street Profits, Apollo Crews. These are all people that Paul Heyman backed and pushed.
Yes. And
Now,
Apollo Crews had literally done nothing for months, came to Raw, had a 30-minute match his first night there, and within 3 months he's a champion.
right. So now let's see what happens now that Bruce Pritchard is running the show, which is a Vince McMahon guy. We're going to get a Vince McMahon image show. How quick does before Apollo Crews loses that title? Let's see in a month or two what it looks like, because it could look completely different, because these are Paul Heyman guys. They're still aligned, and they're not Vince's guys. Vince probably looks at these guys and blames them for the ratings, which is 100% not true, but Vince will pin it on somebody.
And if you look at SmackDown, and I'm not saying SmackDown doesn't use minority wrestlers decently, but when you think of the guys that I just named, most of them are NXT or Raw. On SmackDown, it's a little bit more, I guess, traditional.
And
Braun Strowman's the world champion. We just saw it tonight. AJ Styles became the Intercontinental Champion. Great match, by the way. I would say that show maybe is now that they do have the New Day as the tag team champions. Don't forget that. But Bayley is their women's champion, and then Bayley and Sasha, and I think Sasha's at least mixed, if not entirely black.
She's biracial. Yes,
she's part of the tag team champs that go everywhere. So and it's not just champions, but like you mentioned, Mustafa Ali. Well, he hasn't been used, and I think he was the hacker. But it looks like they might have dropped that angle. So Naomi hasn't really been seen. I don't think, have done as good of a job on SmackDown. That might just be because they don't think those individuals are quite as talented. And if they had a Bobby Lashley or if they had the Street Profits, maybe they would use them better. But for the most part, you do look at NXT and Raw being a little bit more diverse than what SmackDown under Bruce Pritchard all along has been. And now he brings that style, both staying on SmackDown and transferring over to Monday nights as well.
Yes, I mean, Asuka is the women's champion mainly because Becky is out with a pregnancy now. But look at Asuka, how she was treated as soon as she came up to the main roster. You had an amazing talent, and she's so talented in the ring. And actually, her character right now is so entertaining. She's a treasure. Her dancing she has it. They always say wrestlers, they have it. She has it. She's an amazing character, and
way more than Shinsuke Nakamura, I believe.
Yes, going back, talking about him, disappointment. I think he has some of the blame, and also the creative side. But both have blame in there because I think he kind of phoned it in. Yes. Once he came up from NXT, I think he was just like, all right, good, I'm good. I also don't think they didn't give him the best of stuff to work with, but it is what it is there.
So I want to talk about NXT because to me, NXT's night to shine was on Sunday, and I asked Sean Benjamin, do you like NXT having standalone pay-per-views? I'll be honest, I think at times it makes sense. I still think that they're probably, in the long run, also going to be better served to sometimes pair with the Royal Rumble and with WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So if you maybe do the 4 big pay-per-views where Takeover has a show the night before and then maybe 2 of their own.
Yeah, I like that idea. I absolutely like that idea.
And it seemed like this was the right time to do one of them. And they did something that was like, WWE has such a great history and tradition that they need to channel into some of that more often. I thought like the throwback in your house was awesome. And they had the like Ico Pro and stuff like that. Like they had Todd Pettengill. They have so many advantages that other wrestling companies don't, that like they need to use stuff like that more often. I thought it was really cool. Everyone loved the set. Even if you didn't think some of the matches delivered or the storylines going in were great, and I think you could make those arguments, it just seemed like a fun type of show that people enjoyed, especially the NXT fans, who many of whom have been longtime wrestling fans that remember In Your House.
Oh yeah, I think some of the matches were a little bit of a letdown. But like you said, as it took me back to when I was a little kid, because I think the first In Your House was like 95. Is that correct?
I believe so. And if you remember, they introduced In Your House as a transition from the big 5 pay-per-views into 12 pay-per-views a year.
Right. This was a monthly, almost every other month pay-per-view, and it was pretty crappy. Some of them. They
were cheaper. I think they were like cheaper. $20 or $15.
Yeah, and I think there were only 2-hour shows, I think, to start, right?
Yes.
And there were, once they got into it, you like In Your House mind games. I remember that had like a theme, and we had, better quality, but especially very early on, they were like basically a cut above a Monday Night Raw. I like the set. I like some of the old throwbacks because it reminded me as a kid. I have no problem if an In Your House pay-per-view for them becomes a yearly thing. One of the 2 outside. I'm cool with that. The matches itself, a little underwhelming.
I want to get. Everyone's talked about cinematic matches. That seems to be like people want to give their take on that because it's different than every other match. Every other match is based on, was it good in the ring or not. So much of the cinematic was, how was it presented. I really struggled with Cole and Dream. One, why did they need this? Why wasn't it a regular match? And two, what were they thinking with like blinding everyone with the darn lights in my eyes the whole time? It came across visually as just difficult.
They tried something different. It almost feels like now, like every pay-per-view or every other, they want to throw a cinematic match in there. Hey, what can we do to do a cinematic match? This one definitely was not as well received as the past ones. Was definitely a little underwhelming. I did like how Dream came out as Negan. I am a Walking Dead fan, so I did enjoy that. And I don't think you watched The Walking Dead, but the whole setup reminded me of the season 7 premiere when Negan killed 2 characters. It was a pretty big deal in the show, and they had cars lined up just like that. So if anyone is a fan of both, there is definitely a lot of symbolism and resemblance to that. So people who never saw the show might have been a little confused. But the match itself was all right. Definitely wasn't as well produced as others that I thought I've seen. To me, it's probably my least favorite out of all the cinematic matches, including AEW's that we just saw 2 weeks ago, I believe.
The thing here's where I come in on cinematic matches. Why did it make sense for AJ and Undertaker? Because they weren't going to have a good match in the ring.
Right.
Why did it sort of make sense for Bray and for Cena? Because it was more about it was more about the story than the in-ring. Well, with this, these are guys that you want to have in the ring.
Yes. These two
the story was they were great wrestlers fighting for the championship.
Right.
I didn't see a need for this.
Yeah, those two could put on a classic match in the ring with just those two. I don't know why they decided to have those two do it, but they did. I think that's because they thought the cinematic matches have been a pretty big talking point recently. A lot of positive stuff, and I think they were just trying to, hop on that momentum train. And this one missed the mark, I think, for most people. Maybe that means they'll slow it down a little bit, and maybe we won't get one for a while. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe very soon we can have 200, 250 fans in attendance. It seems like we're trending that way.
Right.
So, maybe then after that, once we have even 200 fans, that won't be an option anymore, because that would suck for people to watch a cinematic match on the big screen.
Right. Yeah, and that's something we had talked about. I think you really have to pick and choose when you're going to do that. But I think one reason why they're doing it at almost every pay-per-view now is these pay-per-views, even though they've been shorter, they're still 3 hours typically or so.
But In Your House was what, 2.5, 2:20, I think was the runtime.
Right. It's just because the show, so much is condensed because the entrances take like a third of the time of what they normally did. It almost becomes like your eyes just get sick of seeing the exact same thing, which is 2 guys wrestling in a ring with no atmosphere. Everything looks and sounds the same. So you break up that monotony by doing it kind of like this, which I think is why they really tried to avoid like 3 straight hours of wrestling on Raw and 2 straight hours of wrestling on SmackDown until they realized they had to do it because no one was watching just to see highlight packages and stuff like that. And they had to start keeping up with what AEW is doing. But I think the reason that they're doing it now will completely change when there's fans there in the future. So I think that this will probably be nearing the end of the cinematic, except for very special occasions. I think you could argue that it was a special occasion to have the women main event, and I thought that probably would be the main event. To me, 3 of the most talented in-ring workers in the company. Io Shirai is your new champion. I thought the match disappointed. Justin, what was your take?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that Io won. I'm happy. I'm a big Io fan.
I think her heel turn has changed her career entirely. I did not enjoy her as a face. I think she's awesome as a heel.
Yeah, tremendous wrestler. She almost killed, Ripley there. That was a nasty, nasty way to take the moonsault. I'm shocked. I thought Charlotte would win because I mean that's Vince's number one, I think, wrestler, even out of the men. I mean, Vince loves himself some Charlotte, and hopefully that means maybe we'll see a little less of Charlotte. I mean, she doesn't need to be on NXT. She doesn't need to be on all 3 shows during the week. You can't overexpose anybody. I don't care who you are. Nobody should be on all three shows because that's just overexposure.
Two things in response to that. First off, you said you thought Vince would have Charlotte win, but you knew Vince wasn't going to have Charlotte lose. And she did not. So, Charlotte wins the title from Rhea at WrestleMania. She proceeds to drop it in her first real notable defense. But she drops it without being pinned as part of a triple threat match. So no one really gets over by Charlotte being involved in this. It didn't get Rhea Ripley over because she lost to Charlotte at WrestleMania. It didn't get a redemption. And it didn't get Io Shirai over saying she beat Charlotte Flair because she didn't. To me, I wanted whoever to take the title by beating Charlotte in a one-on-one match, whether it be Rhea or obviously Io. To me, that's kind of like a cop-out.
Yeah, and most importantly, it didn't boost the ratings because let's be serious. Let's be realistic. They put Charlotte on there to boost the ratings to beat AEW, and that hasn't happened. But this lays the problem of the whole WWE. As you said, Charlotte didn't help anybody get over per se. Well, that's WWE's problem, right? Is not creating, bigger stars. And Charlotte,
I think they'll say it was a bigger match because Charlotte was in it. It had more eyeballs on it.
Right. But here's the thing. Charlotte's bulletproof, all right? She could have ate the pin, and she wouldn't have been damaged at all. Charlotte is bulletproof. There's certain wrestlers that are bulletproof. She is one of them. She's that over, okay? She can lose a couple matches, and everything for her is still going to be okay. Now, Rhea Ripley, I think she's tremendous, but now she's had two pretty significant losses in high-profile matches, granted, but okay, where does she go from here? Does she challenge Io Shirai for the title?
I think if Charlotte's gone, yes. So I do think that's kind of where they go. But it's interesting because then what? You either have Rhea lose a third time,
right,
or you have your new champion lose.
Or then Io Shirai, after she wins, loses it, and that doesn't really help her out at all either, right? They consistently book themselves in the corners, and that's the problem with not the long-term booking aspect. They're very short-sighted, and they don't think of the long-term picture.
I think it's very short-sighted what I saw on Wednesday night to wrap up NXT. I don't know if you saw this or not, but anytime Scarlett's on TV, Justin, I feel like you should be tuning in. She came out at the end of the Adam Cole match. She defeated Dexter Lumis, which that'll be a topic for another day. But she comes out. She's, of course, with Karrion Kross, and she puts the hourglass there, indicating that Adam Cole's time as champion could be coming to an end. Karrion Kross basically has had one match of note. It was at TakeOver. He defeated Tommaso Ciampa pretty quickly, pretty decisively. That was a statement match. I didn't really like how they did it, but they did it. So, to me, that creates a monster heel in Karrion Kross. Adam Cole has been their biggest heel for over a year. This seems like a very weird story and extremely quick for Kross to be going for the world title. What do you think happens, and what would you have done with this story?
I'm okay with what happened with Kross. They're clearly, pushing hard and fast. Ciampa,
he seems main roster bound to me. Like that would be the easy solution with
either
Tommaso.
that or to me, Ciampa. I love Ciampa, but his career, I don't know how much longer he has. His body's beat to hell and back. He's not not super young. He's pushing 40, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say he's probably beyond 35, I would guess.
Right.
Around
so,
35.
I don't know how many years he has left helping out, maybe a new NXT superstar. Again, here's somebody maybe willing to put somebody over so they can get to the next level. I'm reading different things on the internet. I don't know if it's true or not that Adam Cole contract is up in August. Then there was another report that came out and says, no, he still has 16 months. If he is up in August and if he's planning on leaving, maybe that's why they're getting Kross ready. They know, okay, Adam Cole's leaving.
Wouldn't you have Dream just defeat him then?
Well, Dream, to go back, has had some issues lately.
But they still let him basically main event a pay-per-view.
Right, but maybe, okay, we let you main event, but we're not ready to put the title on you.
I get that part of it, right.
And in all honesty, does he need the title? No. I mean, I think he's actually ready to be on the main roster.
I think so many of these guys are, but I don't know what the plan is now because we haven't really seen that long when NXT was presented as a legitimate third option that needs to get ratings on USA. That only started in October. So we don't know. Usually after WrestleMania, they call a bunch of guys up. I don't think they want to raid the NXT roster anymore.
Well, this is also true. And I mean, we say main roster. And like we're talking, NXT's on 2 hours every Wednesday night.
But,
so
it does get even less than half of the rating for the dismal Monday Night Raw and SmackDown's a little bit higher than that.
I think if NXT was on a different night than AEW when you have the competition, they might be able to push to 1 million people because I guarantee they could at least get another 250,000 that are watching AEW to switch and watch NXT. I firmly believe that, but Vince decides that he wants it to go up against AEW, so that's what we have.
Does Cross become the next champion?
No, I think there has to be a transitional champion. Even if Cole loses, I almost feel like a face has to win.
I always thought it would be Keith Lee, and I told my friend I think Keith Lee's the guy that beats Adam Cole, but it doesn't seem like they're going that direction. Now it might be Finn against Keith Lee, and Keith is the North American champion, which I thought maybe he could drop that title and go to the main event. It seems like you said they have storylines that are interesting, but it's like whoever wins, good for them, but the person who loses is going to suffer more. You lose more than you gain in some of these stories.
Yeah. I mean, that's you got to be careful with how you book. I could see something. If Adam Cole would be leaving, I have no idea. I could see Finn beating him and then using Finn to then get Cross even more over. Cross beats Finn, and then here's your new Hill champion that runs through NXT for the next year.
Right. And that would make a lot more sense to me. It just seems weird that they've already showed Cross seemingly coming for Cole. That doesn't guarantee that they're going to have a pay-per-view match, but looks like it might be headed that direction. Wanted to touch on a couple things. We already highlighted Raw a little bit, but you said Charlotte, she's bulletproof. Well, she also apparently gets almost an hour of Monday Night Raw after the night after she loses the NXT women's title. Her and Asuka had a main event. They also had a triple threat tag team match. The ratings were bad as normal. What are they doing? Like, what would you... And this was the last time that Paul Heyman was in charge. We don't know if he got pushed out because Vince legitimately thought it was a poor show or if there was other issues behind it. But as many good things as Heyman has done, like, that to me was just awful. Like, that's just begging people to tune out when you have that much Charlotte Flair who's already been on every single show for 2 months straight.
Doesn't it seem like having that much Charlotte Flair, doesn't it seem like that's a Vince call? And look, I like Paul Heyman. I think Paul Heyman's a smart guy. But every time Paul Heyman gets put in the position of power within the WWE, it never lasts long because him and Vince are complete opposites when it comes to the idea of wrestling, who to push, what to do. So I feel like Heyman gets fired from positions from Vince McMahon within months. I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, we all got excited when he was taking over Raw and Bischoff was taking over SmackDown. I think Bischoff lasted a month, and his ass was gone. So Vince has it his way, and honestly, until Vince is no more, he is gone. This is how it's going to be. He's going to put his guys, his cronies, his yes men in power positions.
But in the past, that worked. It's not working anymore.
But Vince doesn't. He'll keep going until it does work. Because clearly Heyman's taking the fall for the ratings right now. I get that, but
he's taking the fall. Everyone in the company should take the fall for the ratings because it's been down across the board. But
who's going to tell Vince he's in the wrong? Dunn, Pritchard, these guys aren't going to go to him and go, Vince, this isn't working right now. We need something fresh. We need something different. This is not working. And I give him a little bit of a pass because of the situation. And right now we don't know what is working and what not's working really to the fans. Right. Is Drew McIntyre's, reign working? I'm fine with it, but is he going to engage a crowd? We don't know. I'm pretty sure if Apollo Crews is in front of a crowd right now, it would be crickets because he's been presented that way, and I think that's how people see him.
I agree. Edge and Randy Orton, they are going to have the greatest wrestling match perhaps of all time this Sunday at Backlash. It's Backlash, right? Am I wrong about that?
No, it's Backlash.
You scared me for a second, Justin.
Well, that's because the concept of the greatest wrestling match of all time is a bit funny to me.
There's only one scenario. This is exposed as not being the greatest match ever, and it's presented as such, and people are going to rightfully mock it. Is there any other outcome?
No, I don't know why you would put two very talented performers in that situation. I'm pretty sure Edge or Randy Orton didn't come up. Yay, guy, Vince, let's call this match the greatest wrestling match ever.
Before it happens. Because you can lie after it. If it's a really good match, you could say it's the greatest ever and force people to sort of believe it.
Yeah, but to call it out, and I think what we saw tonight between AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan on SmackDown will be far succeed what we're going to see out of Edge and Randy Orton here on Sunday night. Now, as I read, the match has been taped already. So they've had chances to edit it and present it as the best way possible. Again, we'll see what that does. Lately, some of the edits in these pre-taped matches they're kind of laughable to me at certain points. I'm like, okay.
I've never understood how you can tell instantly when the announcers do a voiceover. For a company this good, why can't they make it sound anything like the regular commentary? These are things that have happened for 30 years. And to your point, when they edit stuff, it's usually like now when Kairi Sane got her head split open, they edited a lot of that, and it didn't look terrible. It was just like you knew that that's not how it was. But when you're editing an entire match, like you're speculating might happen here, it's not going to look smooth. There's going to be weird camera angles that come out of nowhere, and it's like that would bother me. That would prevent it from being a great match, even if it comes across as what should be considered a great match.
Or it comes off like, oh my God, that was just a serious bump, but you actually don't see the guy take the bump. Like, you're smart enough to know, like, oh, he landed on a pad, or there was something that he landed on. Then they cut to him laying on the ground, like, oh, but you don't see it. Like, okay, like that was a complete edit. Like, people aren't stupid. It is 2020 now.
Anything else that stands out as far as Sunday? Asuka versus Nia Jax is bizarre because it was all about Asuka versus Charlotte on Monday, but Charlotte's not even involved. That's a weird booking there. I actually like Lashley and McIntyre. My only concern is both guys need to win. So I don't know if they're going to do a screwy finish, or more than likely it'll just have McIntyre win and Lashley goes down a couple rungs once again.
Right. Or they'll have somewhat of a screwy finish and they're able to carry on the match until next month. I don't see McIntyre facing Lashley through SummerSlam.
Do you think SummerSlam will be really big this year? Will it feel any different?
If they have their way, yes. I think they're crossing their fingers and hoping that maybe that can be their first show back with fans, or already have fans, and treat it almost like a WrestleMania. I mean, SummerSlam's always considered the second biggest pay-per-view.
But there's no way they could be like capacity in a big venue.
Oh, no. They can't do a 10,000
I think it's supposed to be in Boston. It's not going to be,
right.
You know what I mean?
But can they do it in a place like Texas or Florida or Arizona that will allow 50% capacity? Maybe you can get 5,000 to 6,000 people, into arena, spread out a little bit. That's possible.
How about someone brought up the idea, I think what UFC is doing, like Fight Island. What if WWE did something similar because it's SummerSlam? And it doesn't have to be a private island, but like what if you did it like almost like out in a body of water?
That would be interesting. I think it'd be different and interesting. I mean, you could have fans come in. You could check their temperatures, right? I mean, you could have a protocol in place that you can make sure everybody's safe and healthy and, have it be enjoyable. I mean, I think we're going to see in the fall NFL, college football with fans in attendance. I mean, that seems to be where we're going. And that's probably like 2-3 weeks before those football seasons start. So there's probably a way to have fans in attendance coming up in SummerSlam. I know Vince wants it. I want it. I want to see fans back. And I think the first couple shows, the crowd should be very hot. I mean, it's been so long.
Maybe they will cheer for Apollo Crews and Justin.
maybe. Hell, why the hell not? I mean, I'm hoping. I really am. You have to have something big planned. Now, if they can't have fans and it's going to be the same old, I think we'll see more like a WrestleMania, part 2.
Right.
I think you could see something special if fans can be in attendance.
Final thing, will you be watching Backlash? How much will you be watching? Will you be kind of multitasking? What's your anticipation?
Multitasking. I will put it on. Sunday night, there's nothing really else on TV, so I'm going to throw it on. I have the network. I'll have it on. I'm not going to, I'll probably play with my son a little bit. Bath time's at 8 o'clock. I'll probably go and I'll have it on the background, be giving him a bath. I'll put him
Your
in a bed.
Your bath time or his bath time?
His bath time.
Okay. Yours is at like 9:30.
8:30.
Gotcha.
He likes to, we call it tubby time. So, we'll go in there, get a little bath, and then, read him a little book, and maybe he'll watch a little bit of it. And on a side note, he's playing with my old wrestling buddy, Lex Luger. He's getting the master of the DDT, so that's good to see. He's putting the dog in headlocks, though, so that is a little concerning. But maybe a future WWE superstar.
Justin, great to hear that update. And much like you, I hope that wrestling can get better, because I find myself watching every week with half my attention elsewhere. And I watch every single Raw, I watch every single SmackDown, and it never feels like it's something that I have to pay full attention to.
See, and coming from you, that means something. And I know maybe people who are watching this might.
That's how I feel when I watch a baseball game, because I grew up as a huge baseball fan. I find it so boring that I'm constantly like looking on Twitter. I don't even know. Like sometimes I'll just look at my phone without even knowing what I'm looking at, and then I'll look up. That's what it's kind of. I do workouts now during Raw and SmackDown. I'm paying attention, but it's like I'm 50% attention.
Right, and I think. You watch WWE, you've been a huge fan your whole life, and you're almost watching it now out of obligation than you 100%, are as enjoyment. Yes. No doubt. I got to that point with wrestling myself, too. It was more like, well, this is what I do Monday nights. I've watched Monday Night Raw, so I'm going to watch it. And I eventually, and becoming a dad in the last years, kind of helped. I've had other things to do, and now baseball's back. I coach baseball. Our season's getting going. And I've kind of like, okay, I don't have to watch Monday Night Raw now. I still read what happens if I miss something. I do pay attention, but I don't have to watch it anymore. And once the fans left, like WrestleMania was such a dud for me, mainly because I do always look forward to WrestleMania, but it wasn't WrestleMania. It wasn't the same thing. SummerSlam's always something I look forward to. Again, hopefully we could have fans, but wrestling needs to get better. I don't know, what needs to change. I don't know if it can change. I hope a lot of the independents can come back. I just read today Involve might go under.
That surprised me, because I think they had a decent relationship with WWE. So usually if you have the biggest company in the world on your side, you can find a way to
maybe that means Vince just wants to buy them, and because that's what Vince does. I encourage people, if you're not happy with the WWE product, to check out your local indie shows. I guess some are starting to run again in states that are allowing it. So if you feel comfortable and there's safe protocols, please go out.
I don't know. I had heard that IWC, which you and I have gone to here in the Pittsburgh area, was trying, but I don't know that they're going to run their June show or not. I believe I was thinking that they weren't, but I'm not certain on that.
I don't know. I know they were. I haven't seen, but at least in this state, no gatherings over 250 people. So theoretically, they could sell 200 tickets to a show and put a show on. Right. Whether that's profitable for them or not, I don't know. But I encourage people to watch AEW. I think they're doing a pretty good job with all things considered. There's some old faces that WWE fans would recognize over there right now. I mean, there's still some like Adam Hangman Page. I think is a future star. I used to be so on him, but I think the guy's amazing now. Still have Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks. I mean, there's still good wrestlers out there, even in the WWE side.
I heard Shelton Benjamin put out a tweet, main event, which is the like one show I don't watch.
Yes.
Apparently, they've been having some really good, just straight up wrestling matches, and that's not surprising because I feel like Vince doesn't even know that show exists, so he doesn't care if Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin go out and have a 15-minute match. He doesn't probably micromanage that at all. So
no,
I've always thought that about 205 Live. If you want to see like, if you're a fan of Ring of Honor and AEW to an extent, you'd love a lot of what NXT and NXT UK and 205 Live do in the ring.
Absolutely.
And the other thing, because I want to wrap this up, but I went back and I watched an Edge DVD that I bought in like 2012, right after he retired. And I thought it's kind of fitting because now he's coming back and he's already had the greatest wrestling match of all time that we'll find out on Sunday. Like watching those documentaries, WWE has done some great stuff in that regard. And you have so much at your fingertips. If you want to go back and watch old pay-per-views or watch these behind the scenes, they did something recently with Florida Championship Wrestling. You don't have to watch the live weekly television to still see great wrestling, even if it's something in the past that you're simply revisiting.
Oh, I keep the network right now, not to watch these pay-per-views. I keep it for the documentaries, like The Last Ride and the Florida Championship Wrestling. This is the stuff, I just watched the other day, the Ric Flair 24 about his last match, back in 2000, I think it was 9. That's what I keep it for.
And that stuff seems to be awesome. WWE has done a great job in many regards. Now, I know they sort of rewrite history, but to me, they always hit home runs when it comes to... I bought... maybe I'll turn the camera around at one point, but I have like 60 of their DVDs, and they're usually 3-disc collections, and almost all of them are great. Whether it be the story about Eddie Guerrero, Jake the Snake, Ric Flair, even Chris Benoit, which I think is probably one of the few that you won't find on the network.
What about The Big Show?
The Big Show one wasn't great, but you know what? Listen, you can watch it for an hour and a half. It's not terrible. It's not any worse than watching a bad episode of SmackDown. I'll say that much.
I think Batista wasn't very good either, if memory serves me correct.
A lot of those are interesting because, especially back then, you didn't know about the background of wrestlers. And, like, he grew up in a really hard area of D.C., and I think he had a mother of a mixed race, and he was kind of mocked about that. I'm trying to think back 10 years, but you find out so much about these wrestlers that it makes you care about them way more than anything that they do on TV makes you care about them.
Yes. So what does that say about the way they're presented on TV? Hell, the wrestlers are more interesting when they're tweeting as themselves. You can tell how produced they are.
Big reason why Becky Lynch got over, I think, honestly.
Right. But then, because she tweets and you're like, oh, man, then she gets on and cuts a promo and you're like, wow, they're really reining her in. Like, I mean, it's some of these wrestlers, just let them be themselves. Let them sink or swim. That's the whole purpose of wrestling.
Well, Justin, we'll see who sinks and who swims this weekend and all throughout next week. But for now, we're going to put a bow on this one. 5-Star Pod Wrestle, Twitter, Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube channel. For one Justin Lowery, Sean Meyers signing off. We'll catch you again next week, and we'll talk about the greatest match in wrestling history. You can hear it right here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.